Look who's here, my beautiful friend. Congratulations on finishing up the second process of cost management in predictive projects, and welcome to the third process. We are still in planning phase and we're gonna do the process called determine budget, guys. Okay, so what did we do so far? First process, we came up with cost management plan. Second process, we estimated the cost for each activity and came up with cost estimates document. And now it is time to aggregate all findings and determine budget. So let's start this process with mini terms. Let's get it done. All right. Welcome to mini goal of determine budget process, guys. Okay, what did we do so far about cost part of our project? We came up with cost management plan and we estimated how much each activity will take us. Cost us. Did I say take us? Cost us. Guys, now, I think you agree with me that, okay, we have activity list and the column of cost of those activities are filled up. Okay, we're good. We know cost for each activity. It is time to tide things up. Okay, so we have different pieces of our puzzle, our cost puzzle. Let's put all pieces together. Let's aggregate all costs, all activity costs, and add some extra costs like management reserve and come up with the project's budget. Okay, this is exactly what we're gonna do in this process. Awesome. To do so, we review some inputs. What are those inputs? Obviously, the cost estimates, which were output of the previous process, is input of this process. Okay, so cost estimates, then basis of estimates, then cost management plan, obviously activity list, schedule baseline, scope baseline, risk management plan, EEF, OPA, and then business case, agreements. These are all inputs for this process. You're going to see why agreements are also included, because agreements are contracts. Okay, your contract with like third-party vendor, you need to pay them. This is in the budget, project's budget. It is related to money. That's why you need to review agreements. I don't want to spoil it here. We're gonna get into details in the mini lessons related to inputs. Then to analyze, interpret, and transform those extracted information to insights, we apply TTs, tools and techniques, guys. Expert judgment, cost aggregation, reserve analysis, and funding limit reconciliation. Okay, so we're going to have two new tools and techniques, cost aggregation and funding limit reconciliation. These are two new techniques that we're going to learn, and our efforts will end to two outputs, guys: cost baseline and project budget. Okay, we had scope baseline so far and schedule baseline, and this is the third brother, cost baseline. We're gonna finally create the document called cost baseline and the project budget. Awesome. Now let's start our mini lessons, as always, with inputs and how they help us in determine budget process. Let's get them done. All right. Look up there, cost management in predictive projects, and we're in the third process of cost, which is determine budget. Now, guys, the first batch of inputs are project management plan, like some of these subsidiary plans, and of course, the most important one is cost management plan, how to guide when dealing with cost. Guys, cost management plan guides how we aggregate costs into the baseline and how we structure funding requests. At the end of the day, here is determine budget. We're gonna aggregate, add up those cost of activities. Okay, we're gonna know how to aggregate and how to add up these activities by reviewing cost management plan. Please feel free to read the example. The second batch of inputs are project documents. The two outputs of previous process, cost estimates, basis of estimates, these are also considered project documents. Risk register, lessons learned register, issue log, every other documents that are not included in project management plan is considered project documents. Guys, we need cost estimates document. Why? Because we're going to aggregate and add up the cost of activities. Where are those cost of activities mentioned? In a document called cost estimates, or in activity attributes. Like, it really depended on your preferences. Okay, so that's why cost estimates or activity attributes are input to this process. We need basis of estimates also as an input. Okay, please feel free to read the example because I'm gonna save some time here. Business case and agreements, guys. What's business case? Business case is a document that justifies the existence of the project, and agreements are those contracts that we sign with external parties, for example, external vendors or external employees. Okay, these two documents are inputs to this process. But why these are inputs? Let's elaborate with an example. For example, we open a business case document and it says that total project cost must not exceed $8 million or the project won't meet financial viability. Okay, this statement is mentioned in business case. Okay, so how it helps, how this statement from business case helps us in determine budget process. When we roll up all of the estimates and costs, if the total budget, for example, is 9 million, exceeded the amount mentioned in business case, we need to take some actions. We need to, for example, cut scope. We need to cut some costs because the project's cost shouldn't exceed the amount mentioned in business case. That's why reviewing business case and looking at that number, that limit, is super important. And agreements, guys, the contracts, for example, a signed vendor contract states that MRI machine will cost 1.2 million, payable 50% at signing and 50% upon delivery in Q3. This statement is mentioned in one of the agreements, one of the contracts. You review that agreements and you make sure that this exact amount is mentioned in cost baseline, which is an output for this process, or the Q3 statement, like 50% of this need to be paid in Q3. This should be mentioned in funding requirements section of, for example, cost baseline. That's how a business case and agreement helps us in determine budget process. Awesome. Let's continue our mini lessons with tools and techniques of this process. Let's get it done, guys. All right. Let's continue our mini lessons with tools and techniques of determine budget process. The first one is cost aggregation. Guys, do you agree with me that we have a project, okay? This project has certain number of deliverables, high-level deliverables. Just imagine work breakdown structure, WBS, okay? The first level of WBS was what? High-level deliverables, okay? Then we broke down those high-level deliverables into what? Control accounts. Then we broke down those control accounts into what? Work packages. Okay, we did them in the scope part of the project. Then in the schedule part of the project, we applied decomposition and broke down the work packages into smaller activities. Okay, and guys, we, like for big projects like a hospital project, we have tens of thousands of activities. Okay, we have cost, estimated cost for each of them. Now it is time to aggregate, roll up, add up these activities. This is exactly called cost aggregation. It's a technique, it's a tool to roll up and add up. So each work package has certain number of activities, okay? When we add up the cost estimates for activities that are under one certain work package, it means that we can determine the cost of that work package, okay? When we add up and roll up the cost of different work packages that are under one control account, we can get into the cost of that control account. When we add up or roll up different cost of control accounts, it means we can get into the cost of the high-level deliverables. Now, when we add up the cost of all high-level deliverables, it means we can get to the project budget, the whole cost of our project. This is exactly how we apply cost aggregation or rolling up costs. So guys, cost aggregation means rolling up costs from the lowest WBS level to work packages and then control account and then deliverables to the total budget. Please feel free to read the example. The second tool and technique that we're going to use in determining budget is reserve analysis. Guys, reserve analysis helps us in two ways in projects. Number one, adding extra money or extra time in a schedule part, okay? Extra money or extra time, this is the first way that reserve analysis helps us. The second way is reserve analysis shows us the remaining reserves for each part of the project, okay? Now guys, reserve analysis here in this process helps us by determining that extra money we need to put aside for uncertainties, okay? Guys, there are two types of extra money. Number one, contingency reserve. Number two, management reserve. What's contingency reserve, guys? These are extra money we put aside for known risks that are mentioned in risk register. Okay, the team came up with the list of risks, and based on importance of those risks, based on probability of them, based on their impact, we put aside a money, and this money is called contingency reserve. Let's get into example of contingency reserve. For example, guys, the risk register says concrete prices may increase by 10% during summer month, okay? Our base cost estimate without any contingency, without any reserve for concrete activities is 8 million. Now, we consider this risk. This risk is related to concrete, okay? We consider this risk and we add contingency reserve like 10% of $8 million, which will be 800K, okay? Now, what's the result? The activities budget without the contingency was 8 million. Now, considering contingency, 8.8 million. Okay, we consider that risk. If that risk occurs, we use contingency to recover the cost. Because when risks occurs, guys, it will affect the cost of the project. If we are prepared for that cost by contingency reserve, we can just use that contingency reserve. Okay, but let's say we didn't consider that contingency reserve. What would happen, guys? You'll be beep. Okay? Sponsor will be mad at you. Sponsor would say, why didn't you consider contingency reserve for this concrete activities? Because the team predicted that the cost of concrete would increase by 10%. Why didn't you consider that? So this is the importance of contingency reserve. We should always consider contingency reserve, guys. Okay? And remember, guys, in estimate cost process, we said we consider contingency reserve there. Here, we're talking again about contingency reserve. It really depends on you, guys. You could determine or consider contingency reserve there or here. Doesn't matter. The most important thing is, hey, consider the cost for known risks, known unknowns, okay, by putting aside extra money. Now, guys, let's get to the second reserve, which is called management reserve. I have a question from you. Do you think the team and you and those experts can come up with all risks associated with our projects? Of course, no. We're human. Okay? There may be some risks, some uncertainties that we miss. And that may happen, okay? So for those unknown or for those unknown risks that we may miss when planning, we put aside, again, extra money. And that extra money is called management reserve. So management reserve is extra buffer for unknown surprises, things you didn't see coming. For example, guys, total project cost baseline is 180 million for our hospital project. It already includes contingency reserve. Now, to be in a safer side, okay, cost management plan says, hey, you know what? After you come up with cost baseline, apply 5% management reserve on total cost baseline. Okay? Now, the project budget will be how much? Will be like 180 million plus 5% of 180 million. Great. The third tool and technique is called funding limit reconciliation. We had the term reconciliation, and here we go. Here how we apply the term reconciliation, guys. How do we use this tool and technique, and what is this technique, guys? Now, guys, funding limit reconciliation is about matching the project's spending plan with the organization's funding availability. Okay, it creates realistic funding requirements. Let's elaborate with an example, because examples are always best way to describe stuff, especially complicated concepts. Guys, let's say initial spending plan from cost aggregation plus a schedule says that, hey, for quarter one, when we add up activities, we need 1 million. For quarter two, we need like 5 million. Okay, all of those activities cost will be like 5 million. For quarter three, it is 2 million, and for quarter four, it is 2 million. Okay, this is we came up with these numbers by considering the schedule and the cost baseline. Now, we consider funding constraints, guys. Okay, for example, finance department or EEF will say, hey, organization can release maximum of 2 million per quarter, not more than 2 million. Now, what's the problem with this? What was the cost of activities that are implemented in quarter two? 5 million. What's our limitation and constraint? 2 million. Organization can only release 2 million. So we need to do something. We need to apply the concept of reconciliation, guys. So in these scenarios, reconciliation is needed. Okay? So quarter two requested 5 million, exceeds 2 million cap. We adjust, we apply adjustment. How do we do that? We reschedule some activities which were originally planned to be done in quarter two into quarter three and quarter four. Now, after adjusting the activities timing, quarter one will be 1 million, quarter two will be 2 million, quarter three will be 4 million, and quarter four will be 3 million. Okay? Now, quarter two is in our cap, in our limit. Once we get into quarter three, we need to apply reconciliation again. Why? Because quarter three's activities are cost us 4 million. It exceeds our 2 million cap. We need to do reconciliation again. So this is exactly funding limit reconciliation. Guys, we match the our work's cost to organization's funding limit. Okay? So funding requirement needs to be matched with the organization's funding release. Awesome. These were tools and techniques we used in determine budget process. Sorry, what? Mini question again? Oh man. Sure, buddy. We will have mini question. We deserve a mini question. Let's get it done. Let's get our mini question done. You are a project manager midway through execution when a new regulatory requirement is imposed on the project. This activity was never identified in the risk register and will require additional unplanned effort. The team still has unused contingency funds for known risks, and finance suggests using them since it's still part of the project work. The sponsor disagrees and wants the correct PMI-aligned approach. Which reserve should you use? A. Use contingency reserve because the work is unexpected but still within project scope. B. Request approval to draw from the management reserve since the event was not unidentified risk. C. Split the extra cost between contingency reserve and management reserves. And D. Absorb the extra effort within current work packages to avoid change control. Good question, guys. This question shows how we use contingency/management reserves in our project. Please pause it as always and try to come up with the right option. But let's solve it together, guys. Let's go through the question. You are a project manager, okay? A new risk, a new issue comes up mid-project, and we, as a project team, we haven't identified this. So this is unknown, okay? We are not prepared for this. The team experts didn't include this issue, this risk in the initial risk register. So these new regulatory, okay, when these occurs, your team needs to put some efforts, need to work on this regulatory. Okay, when teams work on something that is not planned, it means you need to spend some money. You need to pay those team members, okay, for that extra effort. Now, to pay them, you need money. Which reserve or money should you use? Contingency reserve or management reserve? It's either A or B, guys. C and D does not make sense, okay? For unknown, for those risks that are not identified, we always use management reserve. That's why B is the correct option, guys. Let's go through the description. Management reserve covers unidentified or unknown risks. This event was not in the risk register, so contingency cannot be used. And it requires formal change control per PMI. Guys, remember, whenever you want to use management reserve, you need to initiate and apply integrated change control process. Option A says use contingency reserve. No. Contingency is only for identified risks and for known unknowns. Option C says split the extra cost. Why? Like, where did you get it from? A splitting thing. No, don't come up with stuff, guys. Like me, Nav. Don't come up with stuff, Nav. Splitting reserves has no PMI basis and hides traceability. And option D says absorb the extra cost within current work packages to avoid change control. Option D is just nonsense, guys. Hiding the cost bypasses proper change control and corrupts cost tracking. Awesome. Now it is time to get into outputs of determined budget process and create the last baseline we were expecting, guys, and it is called cost baseline. So let's get it done. All right. Look up there, guys. Cost management in predictive projects. What phase? Planning phase. What process? Determine budget process. And welcome to outputs of this process. The first and the most important output is cost baseline. The third baseline that we're gonna uncover, guys. We had a scope baseline, those frozen promised list of things that we will do and deliver. We had a schedule baseline. Hey, we promised to our stakeholders that we're gonna start the project this day and finish it on this day, and we're gonna we had start and end date for all important high-level deliverables. Now we are in cost baseline, guys. We're going to create cost baseline as a result of doing determined budget process. So it is the approved total planned cost of the project, includes all activity costs plus contingency reserves for known risks. It's a reference to check if your project is on budget. And the formula of cost baseline, guys, cost baseline includes or equals to activity costs plus contingency reserves. And you may say, okay, what about management reserve? Where is management reserve in the formula? Guys, management reserve is not part of cost baseline. So what's cost baseline, guys? Guys, you agree with me that the project includes thousands of activities, okay? We estimated cost for each activity. Activity A cost us 5K to do. Activity B cost us like 8K. And those, how did we find those costs, guys? We need labor to do things. We need equipment. For example, we rent equipment and that equipment costs us. We need materials, okay? Cost us. Cost of quality, remember those preventive costs, appraisal costs, internal failure costs, external failure costs, okay? And then we also consider risks associated with each activity, and these are contingency reserves. So, and then we added up, rolled up, aggregated all of these activities to get into cost baseline. So guys, cost baseline includes all of the labor, equipment, material, preventive cost, like appraisal costs, internal failure costs, external failure costs, contingency reserves, everything except what? Management reserve. Okay, management reserve is not included. And you may say, okay, where do we include management reserve? Stay tuned. I will answer to that question. But for now, let's focus on cost baseline. And guys, how do we keep cost baseline? Like, how do it look like? Cost baseline, most of the time in a real project, is a time phased like baseline, okay? What do I mean by time phased? It means that it shows spending limit or budget for different time frames. A typical time-phased cost baseline will look something like this, okay? In the first column, we're going to have quarter. For example, quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3. It could be month 1, month 2, up until month 12, month 15, anything. It depends on the project duration, okay? So first column is a time frame. And now the next columns are high-level deliverables. For example, for our hospital project, our first high-level deliverable is inpatient care facility. Second high-level deliverable is pharmacy and labs. Third one, parking facility. Fourth one, project management plans. The next one is training and transition deliverable. Now, guys, let's go to row number 1. What does that mean? It means that, hey, by quarter 1, by end of quarter 1, we have planned to spend $15 million for activities related to what deliverable? Inpatient care facility. Okay, this is our promised cost. Okay, we promise to our stakeholders, to our sponsor, that, hey, we won't spend more than $15 million to activities that relates to inpatient care facility. We won't spend more than $5 million to activities that relates to pharmacy and labs, and so on. Okay, for quarter 2, we promise to our stakeholders, to sponsor, that, hey, we won't spend more than $25 million on activities related to inpatient care facilities. So cost baseline is our promise to stakeholders that, hey, we won't spend more than this amount. And remember, guys, as per scope baseline and as like schedule baseline, cost baseline also is used in control cost process, next process, and used as a reference point. Okay, so we compare the actual cost that we are spending with this reference point, this cost baseline. That's why it is very important. And when we come up with cost baseline, we provide it to our project sponsor and high-level decision makers, and they need to approve it. Once it is approved, a lock goes on it. It will be frozen. So any change to that baseline will go through what? Formal channels, integrated change control process. Acts exactly like scope baseline and schedule baseline. So guys, to wrap it up, we have 3 very, very important baselines: schedule baseline, scope baseline, and cost baseline. Okay, these 3 are our promises to our stakeholders. These 3 are frozen documents. Any change to these 3 documents need to go through formal channels, and change in one of these documents will change other documents also. Why? Let's say like scope baseline. Okay, when you change the scope baseline, it means you add something or you remove something, some work. Okay, if you add a work, that work costs us money, so you need to update cost baseline. That work needs to be scheduled, so you need to update schedule baseline. If you remove something, remove a scope, again, it will have a ripple effect on costs, on a schedule, so we need to update cost baseline, schedule baseline. So these 3 baselines are very tightly connected to each other. And guys, I said cost baseline includes all activity costs plus contingency reserve. And the most important thing, I want to remove confusion. Nav, do we apply contingency reserve in activity level? Like for each activity, we apply contingency reserve, or in high deliverable like level, or in project level? Guys, it really depends on your preferences, okay? You can add contingency reserve for each activity. You could do it, okay? You have a list of risks associated with certain activities, and you can add contingency reserve based on that risk's probability and impact. Or you could add it in a high level, like deliverable level, okay? We could say, okay, for this deliverables that includes these work packages and activities, we add 10% of cost of making that deliverable as contingency reserve. The way you apply and come up with contingency reserve is really depend on cost management plan. You open up cost management plan, you go to a section called, okay, how to apply contingency reserve, and the instruction on how to come up with contingency reserve is mentioned there. And guys, in risk part of our tutorial, we're going to dig into contingency reserve and management reserve. So you got to stay tuned till we get to the that risk part of tutorial. But for now, just keep this in mind that you could apply contingency reserve in any level you want. Most important point, cost baseline does not include management reserve. Now let's get into our mini question. We deserve a mini question and a break, guys, because we're covering a lot. Okay, so with confidence, let's get our mini question done. Let's get our mini question done, guys. You are finalizing the budget for a predictive infrastructure project. The approved budget now includes all estimated costs for activities, contingency reserves, and is time-phased for monitoring cost performance. Management asks for the official document that will be used to measure and control cost performance throughout the project. What should you provide to management? A, project funding requirements. B, cost management plan. C, cost baseline. And D, performance measurement baseline. Good question, but easy one, guys. And I'm sure you got it right. The correct one is C, cost baseline. Whenever in a question you see performance tracking, okay, it's baseline, one of the baselines. If it talks about like performance tracking of schedule, it's a schedule baseline. If it talks about cost, it's cost baseline. If it talks about like the work and scope, it's a scope baseline, okay? So the correct option is cost baseline. But why? Let's read the description. Cost baseline equals approved time-phased budget, including contingency reserves used to measure and monitor cost performance. It is the specific budget reference against which CPI, EAC, and other cost metrics are calculated. You're going to see and learn about CPI, EAC, and other cost performance tracking mathematical indicators, guys, okay? Why other options are incorrect? A, project funding requirements. Project funding requirements show total funding needs and cash flow, but aren't used for ongoing cost performance measurements. Option B, cost management plan. It's a how-to guide when dealing with cost concerns, guys. It does not include the project budget related numbers. And option D says performance measurement baseline. Performance measurement baseline includes scope, schedule, and cost baselines broader than what's being requested here. Guys, if cost baseline was not in the options, the correct one will be performance measurement baseline. What is performance measurement baseline? It's a concept that includes all three baselines: a scope baseline, schedule baseline, and cost baselines. Since we have cost baseline as an option, okay, we pick cost baseline. Why would we pick like the master baseline of cost baseline? Like performance measurement baseline includes cost baseline, but the question is specifically talks about cost performance throughout the project. That's why C is the correct one. Now let's continue our mini lessons with the second output of determine budget process. Let's get it done. All right, guys, the second output of determine budget process is project budget, okay? Let's make it clear and simple, guys. Project budget means cost baseline plus management reserve. Remember, you asked, okay, where do we keep management reserve then, guys? Like NAV. In project budget, guys. Okay? Again, project budget equals cost baseline plus management reserve. Okay? So management reserve does not include in cost baseline, but it is included in project budget. Guys, the project budget will look like something like this, okay? We're going to have quarter, just like cost baseline, okay? Cost baseline amount, and then management reserve, and then cumulative funding requirements. Okay, so how much management reserve we put aside? Do we put aside like management reserve for each quarter, for each deliverable, for each activity? You need to tailor to context. It really depends on your project's complexity, size, preferences. Different project managers apply different management reserve, like the way of applying management reserve. It really depends on your project environments. But most common way, guys, for example, for our hospital project, look at that. Is that green or blue? I'm colorblind also. So management reserve calculation, 5% of total cost baseline set aside for unknown unknowns. So guys, the total cost baselines, if we sum up all cost baselines for all quarters, it will be 171 million and something. Okay. Now, our cost management plan says, hey, for unknown unknowns or unknown risks, okay, apply 5% of total cost baseline. So 5% of 171 million and something would be $8,572,000. Okay, this is management reserve. Now, mid-project, if something happens, some risk that are not identified in risk register happens, you wouldn't be surprised. You have put aside money, you have put aside management reserve. Now you can use that management reserve to deal with that risks. This is why putting aside money as management reserve is super important. And guys, remember, to use management reserve, you need to go through formal channels. To wrap it up, guys, cost baseline includes cost of all activities plus contingency reserve. Project budget is cost baseline plus management reserve. And remember, in control cost process, next process, we're gonna compare the cost of actual work with baseline, not project budget. This is very important, okay? You may get a question saying, okay, which statement is true? So be careful about these very important terms and statements. Awesome. I think we deserve one more mini question and then mini FAQs, okay? So let's get our mini question first done. Mini question. You are a project manager preparing the project budget for approval. Your cost estimates are complete and risk analysis identified several known risks that may increase costs. Your organization requires that contingency reserves be managed by the project manager, while management reserves are controlled by the sponsor. Finance challenges your budget, asking why the requested amount is higher than just the sum of estimates. How should you structure the requested budget? A. Request the cost estimates plus contingency only and let the sponsor deal with any unknown risks separately. B. Request the cost baseline estimates plus contingency plus a separate management reserve controlled by the sponsor. C. Request one combined reserve amount added to the estimates to simplify the budget structure. And D. Request only the estimates now and add both reserves later through change requests if needed. Good question, guys. As always, please pause it and come up with the right option. But let's get the right option together, guys. What's the problem, guys? Problem is, the question is asking about project budget. Simple, okay? First line, you are a project manager preparing the project budget for approval, okay? Go to the last three lines. Finance challenges your budget, asking why the requested amount, requested budget, is higher than just the sum of estimates. So you need to educate your finance team, because finance team does not know what is the definition of project budget. Project budget equals to cost baseline plus management reserve. Cost baseline itself includes estimated activity cost plus contingency reserve. Okay, so Your project budget should include both cost baseline and management reserve, both estimated activities, estimated cost for all activities, plus contingency reserve, plus management reserve should be included in project budget. That's why option B is the correct option. Let's read the description, guys. It says PMI says the project budget equals cost baseline plus management reserve. Cost baseline itself equals to estimates plus contingency for identified risks. Management reserve equals for unknown risks and kept outside PM control. So to use management reserve, you need to go through formal channels. Why other options are incorrect? Guys, option A says, hey, request the cost estimates plus contingency only. It excludes management reserve in project budget. It violates project budget's definition. Project budget includes management reserve, but option A says exclude management reserve. No. Option B is correct. Option C says request one combined reserve. There is no such a thing as one combined reserve, guys. That's why we have two separate definitions, contingency reserve and management reserve. Contingency reserve is controlled by project manager in most of the project, guys. Management reserve is controlled by upper level authority like sponsor. That's why it is called management. For example, PMO office or the project sponsor controls management reserve. If an unknown risk happens, project manager needs to request from sponsor to use management reserve, okay? It is not in the authority of project manager to use management reserve. And we don't have such a thing as one combined reserve. That's why C is incorrect. And D says request only the estimates now and add both reserves later. Guys, reserves must be planned up front, not added later by change requests. Okay, that's why we are in planning phase. Look up there, we're in planning phase. Right now we are talking about management reserve and contingency reserve. Okay, so we need to add these two reserves as early as possible, not later. Awesome. I think you may have some remaining concerns about determined budget process, so let's get all of them resolved by mini FAQs. Let's get it done. All right. Look up there, guys. Cost management in predictive projects. What phase? Planning phase. What process? Determine budget process. And welcome to mini summary of this process. What did we do, guys? We rolled up activity and work packages cost to create the total project budget. We identified phased funding needs and reconciled them with funding limits. To do that, we used several tools and techniques. Like what? Like cost aggregation. What's cost aggregation, guys? We have estimated cost for each activities. Let's say thousands of activities. Okay. Now we add these activities cost to get to the cost baseline. For example, a stakeholder comes to you and says, hey, I want the cost for this deliverable A. Now, go back to WBS, guys. Deliverable are categorized into control accounts. Control account itself is categorized to work packages. Work packages are categorized into what? Activities. Now, to get to the cost of that deliverable, we add up all activities that are mentioned under this deliverable. Okay, this is exactly what cost aggregation means. Adding up, rolling up, summing up the activities cost to get to the upper level cost, for example, work package cost or control account cost or deliverable cost or the project itself. Then we also applied reserve analysis. We apply reserve analysis to come up with contingency reserve and management reserve of our project, guys. What's contingency reserve? That's extra money that we put aside for identified risks, because when determining budget, we need to consider risks that are identified in the risk register. What's management reserve, guys? Management reserves are for unknown unknowns or those unknown risks, okay? Our team with experts and you as a project manager, you cannot identify all risks. Maybe you miss some risks and you'd be surprised mid-project, like something happens that is not in the identified risk. in the risk register. What should you do? Can you use contingency reserve for that? No, 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 no. You need to use management reserve. And to use management reserve, you need to go through integrated change control process. Awesome. We also used another tool and technique called funding limit reconciliation, guys. What does this mean? It means adjusting the schedule or spending to match funding availability. For example, shifting activities because monthly funding cannot exceed 50K. Some of the organizations have, for example, monthly spending limit. Let's say 50K as an example, okay? But we as a project team, we have included activities to be done in that month, which the cost of those activities are 60K. So it exceeds the funding limit of our organization. What should you do? You need to reconcile. You need to apply a tool and technique called funding limit reconciliation. You need to adjust the timing of activities that are happening that should be done in that month and move it to later months to be in that cap. Awesome. As a result of reviewing different inputs and applying reconciliation, cost aggregation, and reserve analysis, we came up with 2 documents, guys. Cost baseline, which includes all those activity costs, estimated costs, the resource cost and cost of quality, plus contingency reserve. Okay, this is cost baseline. This is our frozen list. In control cost process, which is next process, we compare the actual spending with the cost baseline. Okay, and the next output is project budget. Project budget is cost baseline plus management reserve. The most important point, guys, management reserve is not in the cost baseline. Awesome. And guys, while you were performing the process called determine budget, you applied one principle. You was a diligent, respectful, and caring steward. What does this mean? It means you cared about project's money, about your organization's money, okay? You're determining budget. It means you're working with real money. You're planning for real dollars, guys. You need to protect that money of your organization. You shouldn't allocate budget for nonsense works. You need to make sure that the money, the project's budgets are spending on meaningful and those activities that add value to your project. Awesome. This was a very good mini summary. Thanks for finishing up another process.